Hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. I'm here with my co-host Elizabeth, as always, and excited to be. Now we're starting to do a lot of interviews together. And the reason we decided to do this is because we want you to know a little bit more about the finance and economics. Those are very important when you think about geopolitics. Well, today we have an interesting guest, and I consider him a friend of mine. Usually I like how you always say, you always know, guys. I don't use that term very loosely. So when I say friend, it means a lot to me. So I have a guest here that you will find his insights and perspective about geopolitics, economics, democracy, and so forth. Very, very insightful, or very insightful. That is so. So let's bring in our guest here. All right. Hi, SL.
Hello, David. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Good to see you. And first of all, thank you very much for paving the way for us. So, for carving out time for us here. For those who do not know who SL is, SL Kanthan is a geopolitical analyst, he's a columnist, he's a podcaster, and a blogger based in Bangalore, India. His new podcast, Geopolitics Demystified, which I highly recommend for you. And we will put the link for you guys, can be found on YouTube and Spotify. He writes geopolitical articles for international magazines, the Russian and the Chinese and the Germans. So all those magazines from those countries. So, all right, let's get into our conversation here. The first question I'd like to start with, SL, is I like to get your take on the landscape, the geopolitical landscape of the world. Where do you see things moving?
Okay. So we are actually living through a very, very profound time. So this kind of a situation happens like maybe every 100 or 200 years. So we should be very glad and also scared that we
Mhm.
are living through this moment. And this is the transition of powers. So if you look at the last, say, 500, 600 years, you can see some major the European the empires like the Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, French, British, and even you can think of Germany as a
Mhm.
small empire for a few decades. And then they all transition. So they all have their power for a while, like maybe 50, 60, 100 years, and then they fade away, right? So when was the last time you really worried about Portugal? But
Yeah.
they ruled the world once upon a time. And so the American century, it started right after World War I, or but definitely after World War II. So, in 1944, the Time magazine guy, he came up with the phrase "American Century"
Century.
because the U.S. establishment understood that the Europeans are going to destroy themselves in World War II,
Mm.
and the U.S. will be the only one left standing behind. So we've had that for 8 decades.
Mhm.
And then there's also a theory about it's called the fourth turning.
Mm-hmm.
And it says that every 4 generations, people make huge mistakes. So they
Yep.
start wars
Mm-hmm.
because all the people, their grandma, grandpa, who actually lived through the wars, they're gone. And the young people cannot even imagine having a war. And, for example, you can see that like in Europe now, right? So they fought World War II with Russia. And so now they are starting a war again with Russia because the people in Europe now, they don't have a memory of the devastation, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So they should spend like an hour watching the photographs and videos of World War II, and then they'll be like, "Oh my God, let's not start a war again. This was so
Yeah.
terrible." And
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead. So this is actually I'm a big fan of the Fourth Turning, and then I'm also a big fan of Ray Dalio. So
Mhm.
Ray Dalio talks a whole lot about this, and it's very interesting because what he says is flat out accurate, especially living in the country that unfortunately is the sinking ship of
Sure.
of the situation. It's very very accurate to what's happening right now. So I love that you're bringing it up.
Awesome, Elizabeth. So glad to hear that. Yeah, so I learned that from Ray Dalio. Um, and it's so sad because if I look at the US media, the politicians,
Mm-hmm.
they don't talk about these things at all. So Ray Dalio, he's he's kind of pushed on the fringe. He should be on CNN like every other day.
Yeah.
But they don't bring him on. And uh, the politicians are making a huge mistake
Yeah.
about not preparing for the coming world. So we can talk about the de-dollarization, the shift in the empires, and if you just look at the GDP, and if you draw the world's GDP, like the central gravity of GDP, then you can see the US actually peaked in 1950. So
Yep.
in 1950, the center of gravity of the world's GDP was very close to the US border. And it's been slowly shifting to the east as the rise of Asia, rise of China, especially,
Mm-hmm.
it moves the GDP, and the GDP is directly related to the diplomatic power, the geopolitical power, the military power,
Mm-hmm.
and the US has made a lot of mistakes over the last 40 years since the Wall Street types. They basically took over the American economy, the American politics, the American academia, the think tanks. All of them are basically uh, bought by the Wall Street types. So they glorified the outsourcing of
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing.
Mhm.
So like if you go back to the 19th century and you look at the American leaders, they were actually very smart and they were very patriotic, and they were also visionary. And now you look at the clowns. My God, it's
Yeah.
like the next 10 to 20 years will be very, very profound, very, very consequential, and they're going to determine the fate of the rest of the century.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So that's the point we are in. And well, everybody should be focusing and should be following up on what's happening around the world, and they should not just read the mainstream media. They have to watch your shows, like
Indeed.
and they have to read some Chinese media, Russian media. It's not going to hurt your brain, so just a little bit. Okay, like maybe spend 10 minutes a day reading the Chinese media and the Russian media, and you will get, and you don't have to believe in them, but you'll be able to understand that there are some other perspectives, and there are the information that you're not going to get from the mainstream media, and then you can make up your own mind.
Yeah. I really I really I agree with that very much because it's not like Russia and China don't also have their own propaganda and their media, but the reality is that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of all of them. And if you don't get the other perspectives, you don't know where that middle point is for the truth. And you're not able to see that there are other perspectives. And especially because, the US, if you live here, it's become harder and harder to ignore that there's a very big problem
Mhm.
because the you go into any major city. So we're in Texas. You go into any major city, and the center of the city looks like it looks unrecognizable from even what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, the homeless population has grown exponentially. The streets are always torn up. It's a lot of vacancy, especially in like high-rise buildings and in sort of business spaces, which that's a whole nother interesting problem that's coming up, is all the loans that are coming due on all of these corporate spaces, which is for another show, but it's very interesting. And there are big concerns for the banking sector for that reason. But one of the things that I really appreciate, as I was checking out your Twitter, I really like your Twitter. It is your name, I think, if you guys want to check it out. But one of the things that you talk about is how the U.S. is actually not in fact a democracy. It is an oligarchy, plutocracy, or corporatocracy, but it is not a democracy. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I completely agree. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because especially as the United States goes out and fights wars and fuels Ukraine and all of that out of the sharing and spreading of democracy, when that's really not something that we have here. And I want to make sure that whoever, that our viewers actually understand what the structure is here in the United States on, a non-emotional, but like really a fundamental level. Who is actually running things and what are they doing?
Sure. So if we look at the word democracy, it comes from Greek words, right? Demos and kras, means rule by people. And Lincoln had the best definition for democracy. So he said, democracy means it's going to be of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we have to think, so is the US really of the people, by the people, for the people?
No.
It's certainly not for the people. Okay.
No joke. No joke.
Yeah. So so there's a guy named Joseph Stiglitz, and he won the Nobel Prize for the economics, and he was the chief economist of the World Bank, and he was or is a professor at Columbia University. So he said, he wrote an article, and the title of the article was "For the 1%, by the 1%, and of the 1%."
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's the situation we're in, and it was not always like that. The U.S. had some problems with, say, the robber barons at the beginning of the 20th century, and people like Rockefeller and Carnegie, J.P. Morgan. They had too much power. But then Roosevelt was able to break down those monopolies. So people understood that if you have a very high concentration of wealth, you cannot have a democracy, because then the very few people are going to run the country.
Yeah.
And I believe that it certainly got worse with the founding of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913. And that's why people like Ron Paul, one of the very, very few good politicians in the US, they always said, so you have to get rid of the Fed,
Yeah.
but nobody listened.
Yeah.
And then, like if you listen to Woodrow Wilson, he was the president from 1912 until 1920, I believe.
Oh.
So
You hear my dog?
Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
So Woodrow Wilson said there is a small group of people who are controlling America, but everybody is really scared to talk about this group. And when they complain about this group, they talk in very soft voices, and it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's actually true now. So, I tell people, okay, just because you get to vote once every 2 years or 4 years does not mean you have a democracy.
Yeah.
Like, can you pick up the phone right now and call your representative, say the House of Representative from your district, or the senator, or the president? You pick up the phone and you call them up and you say, hey, I live in a democracy, and you guys represent me, and in fact I actually voted for you, so I need to talk to you for 5 minutes. Do you think somebody will pick up the phone?
Their
No.
assistant, 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 assistant,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
or a phone service.
yeah, they'll be like, good luck, send me an email,
Yep.
right? So what kind of a democracy is that if you don't have access to your politician? But okay, let's say you write a check for $10,000, okay, and I guarantee you can get a meeting with that representative. Okay,
Yeah.
just with $10,000, he'll meet with you for at least 15 minutes. He will listen to your concerns. Okay, and so now let's say you write a check for $50,000. Then you'll get invited to a special dinner. Okay, so, and you can really schmooze with a lot of other rich people, and the congressman will really listen to you. Okay, suppose if you write a check for $500,000. Okay, do you know what that will happen? You can become like an ambassador to, say, the Bahamas. Okay, guaranteed. You write a check for $500,000, you will get like an ambassador position. It's like the best job in the world. Okay, so you don't do anything at all, you can hang out. And if you write a $4 million check, you can become an ambassador to France or Germany. And if you're like, say, so if you can write a $50 million check, you'll get a job as whatever you want in the cabinet of the new president. Or if you're too busy, you get to choose the guy who's going to be the next,
Yeah.
the next.
Yeah.
So we live in the system where money rules, and who has the money? With three sorts of people. One is the corporations. They have like plenty of money. If you look at, say, BlackRock, they
Yeah.
control pretty much all the S&P 500 companies. They manage like $10 trillion of wealth. So they have enormous power.
Mhm.
And then, so what they did was to basically to do the separation of the influence. So the Wall Street people, they get to appoint all of the SEC and that kind of stuff. And the big pharma, they get to appoint the FDA, the EPA, and all those guys. So like you have all these sectors, and they choose their own the influence. So that's why it's, the corporatocracy. And then a plutocracy means it's ruled by the rich. And that's what we have. And if you look at all the politicians in the US, they're all millionaires. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They are.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, they go into Congress with, like, say, maybe $5 million of wealth. And by the time they leave, it's like $100 million.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very corrupt system where the politicians, they give favors to the big corporations, and then the corporations funnel the money like a kickback to the politician, and it's all legalized. So terrible. And then we have the oligarchs, the billionaires. And people love the billionaires when they support their party. Okay? So
Mm-hmm.
they would, so if you talk to a Republican, they would say, "Oh, George Soros is so evil," but then they like the billionaires who give the money to the Republicans.
Yeah, like Elon Musk. They're like, oh, well,
Yeah,
Elon Musk is the savior of everything.
yeah. But you know what? Behind doors, all the billionaires, they belong to one class. It's called the billionaire class.
Yeah.
And you and I don't belong to them. And they love one another. They're not going to fight. Like if you put one a liberal billionaire and a conservative billionaire, do you think they're going to fight? Well,
Mm.
no. They're going to sit together. They're going to go to the World Economic Forum, and they're going to sit around the table, and they're going to discuss how to get even more billions.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It's funny. I saw a quote once that said, when someone hoards stuff, right? Like there's a TV show called Hoarders. If someone hoards stuff and they have stuff everywhere, we consider that a mental illness. But when someone hoards money, we consider that the thing that everyone should be. Like we celebrate it when people hoard money. And it's very interesting, if you hoard stuff, mental illness. If you hoard money, you're a hero that everyone wants to be. And I think it was, I grew up in the you guys should be Mark Zuckerberg generation, right? So everybody was like, look at Mark Zuckerberg. You should be just like him. Look at what he created with Facebook. Now we know that, Facebook and all social media contributes to mental health issues with children, and, they're selling our information. We found out all this stuff, right? And the Bill Gates of the world, right? You should be like Bill Gates. You should be like all of these people that we are now finding out are not so great of people. And it's interesting how ingrained that is in us. And I think you can also see that with the British royal family. People had posters of Prince William and Prince Harry on their walls, growing up. And it's very interesting that kind of worship of people who have this billionaire status has sort of been ingrained in us since we were kids.
Yeah, yeah. And so that is the dream that they sell you, right? So it's like going to Las Vegas. So if you go to Las Vegas, everybody thinks they're going to hit the jackpot.
Yep.
Right? And you land at the airport. Everybody is full of energy. They're all hopeful. Man, this could be the time when I can make my millions in Vegas.
Yeah.
So, and they have, only a very, very small fraction of the people are going to win the jackpot.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people are going to leave Las Vegas after having lost money. And that's become the truth in the US economy and around the world. So, so it's the same in my country too. So, for people who think I'm just picking on the US, don't worry.
No, you're not.
Well, I can say a lot of bad things about my country too.
Yeah. No, you're
So
not.
in
Speaking the truth.
Yeah.
SL.
Yeah. So in the US, the top 10% own 93% of the stocks.
Yeah.
The top 10%. And the top 1%, they own like 50% of the stocks. So, but then you go to social media, everybody celebrates the stock market. Oh, the S&P 500 went up by 20% this year. And then, but the average person has like maybe $10,000 in stocks,
Yeah.
right? and they get like $1,000, and then you pay the capital gains tax. It's like maybe $700. So, but people are fooled to, uh, I mean, as you said, celebrate the wealth of the billionaires and the oligarchs, and they don't understand all of the intricacies, right? So there was a Forbes article a while ago, and it said the wealthiest Americans had stored something like $12 trillion in the offshore bank accounts.
Mm.
Like
Oh wow.
Panama,
Oh wow.
Caribbean, blah blah. You know, and by the way, that guy who wrote the article,
Yeah.
he died of a suicide a
Oh
couple of
really?
months ago.
Wow. Everyone
Suicide.
believes that now. It was
Yeah.
it's funny I brought this up in one of our shows that when these two Boeing whistleblowers that have died, one committed suicide and the other died of a rapid onset disease. And it was so funny because collectively, when the first one committed suicide, collectively, the internet went, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't. You're right.
To the extent that the FBI had to look into it because he didn't.
Yeah. And if you look at who writes the bills, it's all like corporations. They literally they rent like a conference room in some five-star hotel, and there will be some staff from the Congress, and then there will be a whole bunch of lawyers and lobbyists from the corporations, and they write the law, and they write the bill for like 1,000 plus pages, and then they show it to the politicians like 4 or 5 hours before they have to sign the bill. So nobody reads the bill. Nobody knows what's in the bill, and they just know the talking points. So and okay, so but societies always have some the inequality. Okay, so that's normal. But how much inequality and how prosperous the average person is, that matters. So, like, there are statistics like 50% of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck. They're not able to save even like $1,000. There are like a lot of really bad statistics about how the average American is. And then you look at the infrastructure, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Homeless people. I mean, 100,000 Americans die every year from drug addiction, and it's not because it's their choice, it's because of the suffering, the mental suffering, and then they have to resort to to drugs to drown their sorrow. And the sociologists, they have a term for that. It's called the deaths of despair. That's the term they use. And then you look at the middle America, the Rust Belt, you go to Kansas, Kentucky, blah, blah, blah. Once but thriving cities, cities that were full of jobs and full of solid middle class people in the 1950s, 60s, and even up to the 70s are now like forlorn. They are completely desolated. Many of the homes are not even occupied. So there are a lot of problems, and it's because of lack of democracy. They're not being, the people are not being represented. Some people say, oh, the US doesn't have democracy, it is a republic. Well, it's not a republic either if there's so much corruption, and if things are so rigged. The financial system is rigged, the political system is rigged. So,
It's interesting because every time somebody brings up to me, oh, but they work for us, right? The government works for us, the president works for us, our Congress people work for us. And the reality is that they don't. They work for who pays their paycheck. And we don't do that. The salary that they get is nothing compared to what they get from the interests that pay them far, far more. So, who do you, even in somebody, working in a regular company, right? Who is your boss? Your boss is the one that pays your paycheck. And if what yes, we technically put those people in there, but who funded the campaigns that allowed them to get into that place to get there to begin with? And we didn't do that. The candidates, we're not out here for the constituency isn't out here giving the most money to candidates. One of our guests actually told me that, Beto O'Rourke, who was campaigning here in Texas, he lost, but it cost him $100 million. That campaign cost him $100 million to lose. And so the people who wanted him in position, they're not the ones who gave him that $100 million. And so who are you beholden to? You're always beholden to your boss, the person who signs your paycheck, because that's how you're able to get anywhere or do anything. And so it's very much an illusion that it is the people, it is us that they are beholden to, because we aren't the ones signing their check. We aren't the ones paying their mortgage.
Yeah, so if you think your politician works for you, so go through the experiment we chatted about before. Pick up the phone and you call him and you say, "Hey, buddy, so you work for me, so return my call. Good luck." Okay, but if a millionaire and a billionaire and the lobbyists, they want to meet with a politician, they can do it on the same day, right? So, like if, like, say, Pfizer's lobbyist, he calls up a representative or a senator, they can arrange a meeting the same day. He'll say, "So come meet me at this bar, at this restaurant at 6 p.m." and they will be there.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's fundamental difference.
Yeah. Let's shift to. I want to get your take about some aspects of the geopolitical landscape. And with this, I want to ask about what do we expect from India? The role that India is going to play in this new multipolar system.
Yeah, it's a big $1 trillion question.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Because looking at the big picture, the India is going to play a bigger and bigger role. So in the last couple of years, it surpassed the UK and France in terms of the nominal GDP. And in the next 4 to 6 years, or even maybe 2 to 6 years, it's going to surpass Japan and Germany. And it's going to be the third largest economy.
Good. You have more people than all of those places combined. Good. I'm so glad. That makes me so happy.
So the good thing and the bad thing about being poor is this, okay? So, being poor, is obviously bad for the obvious reasons. But the good thing about being poor is that the growth rate is very high, right? So we can easily, like our GDP per capita is only like $3,000 or so. So from there to go to $6,000 is quite easy. And then from $6,000 to $10,000 will be moderately difficult, but it's not impossible. So the growth factor is there, and that's why that means the middle class is going to grow a lot. So if you look at the families in India, most of them, they don't have the gadgets that you would take for granted in your home, like say refrigerators, washing machines, ovens, dryers, blah blah. The people don't have that. But on the other hand, in the next few years, those sectors are growing to grow very, very fast. So there's a lot of potential for growth. And that's good for the Wall Street types, the investors, and so they can come and sell their products because for Wall Street and the corporations, what matters is what the growth every year, right? So the CEO has to go before the shareholders, and he has to hold the financial conference every quarter, and it doesn't matter how much money he has already. Sorry, folks. Can you just...
Oh no. Did we lose you, SL? Can you hear us? I think we may have lost. There he is. There he is. Okay.
So sorry. So sorry.
No
No,
problem.
no worries. That's the beauty of having this recorded. We can
Yeah.
take this out.
Take it out.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. So where were we? I forgot.
Yeah, it's about the
Growth.
The growth. Yeah. So it means it's going to like bring in a lot of the foreign the investment, and all the companies want to invest, and it's the same thing that happened to China 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And people really underestimated China. If you go look at like some of the famous thinkers like Gerald Siegel, Brzezinski, and and all those guys in the late 1990s, they all said, "Oh, China is so poor; it has no chance. They're all communists. My God, can you imagine poor communists succeeding? No way." And that's why they let China into the WTO. And in 2001, George Bush's team, they got together with China, and they signed the deal, so letting China into the WTO. And that was probably the worst geopolitical mistake that the US did. But for my country, India, it's not as well organized and disciplined as China. So we won't grow as much as China did, but we will grow. Like we'll grow 6, 7, 8% for the next decade.
Wow, that's very ambitious.
Well,
That's
and
very
6-7% adds up.
yeah, but at the same time, I will sort of given Modi's policies, which for the last 14 years I've been watching.
Yeah.
And I talk to people in India, the average Indian citizen. When I'm talking to the elites here,
Yeah.
Even in the day, my days in Washington, you will ask. I worked with individuals from India,
Yeah.
but they were from some upper class or whatever.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like, yeah, that will be very ambitious. 8% growth. That's a big deal.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a big deal, but I do understand what you're saying. The gap between 3,000 a year to 6,000 a year is not huge, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to make those large strides when the gap is, when we're still talking about very, very small numbers comparatively, right? So, but that makes me feel good. That brings me hope. I think poverty globally is ridiculous, considering how much resources we really have on this planet. Poverty at all is unacceptable and ridiculous. It shouldn't exist. Absolutely, David.
And to me, that was always the idea about India. Why their people deserve, their citizens deserve to live a comfortable life and all that. Why do you have to have areas that are decimated as far as infrastructure and so on?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so by the way, that said,
Yeah.
we have a lot of problems. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it is not guaranteed. So people have to be very disciplined. They have to work hard. The government and the corporations have to spend a lot of time
Mhm.
thinking and planning. They have to be patriotic, so they have to care about the
Yeah.
nation, and like rather than just squirreling money in the Swiss banks. And we have a
Yeah.
lot of problems with, say, like basic things like water,
Yeah.
like water, electricity, huge problems, and pollution. Like
Yeah.
already, if you look at the top 100 most polluted cities in the world, 75 are from India. Okay,
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
so yeah, so it's not easy, it's not guaranteed, but if they do it properly, if they learn from other countries, then there could be very solid growth for the next decade. And then after that, it's going to be very challenging, you
Yeah.
know, because you look at China, it's very easy to just like do the assembly jobs, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
like you make the shoes for Nike,
Yeah.
that's sort of easy. But then at some point, you want to make your own shoes, right? And you want to have your own brand.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh my God, how hard it is to figure out all the technology behind the shoes and to have the factories to do the marketing,
To do the
blah, blah,
marketing.
blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Supply
You know,
chain.
yes, yeah. So it's not easy. And you need to build the seaports, you need to build railways, you need to have people with PhD in chemistry, so they can figure out the best rubber or whatever material that goes into the shoes. So there's a lot of science involved too. And so that kind of stuff, we have to see if India has the capability and the wherewithal. Some people say, hey, like if you go back 2000 years,
Hmm.
then for about 2000 years, the world's number one and number two, the largest economies, were China and India.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So so they say, they talk about the situation reverting back to what might be the norm. The
Yeah.
two countries with the most number of people can also be two big poles in the multipolar world.
Mm.
Well, India is interesting because India has such like a beautiful, rich history. So many beautiful. So I went to one of my very good friends' weddings in India. I will not say where because there were beautiful parts of it and there were parts of it that were not so beautiful.
Very
Um
ugly.
yeah, I had
Yeah,
never seen that much trash everywhere
yeah,
before. Um,
yeah.
and the income inequality is staggering.
Mm.
But fundamentally, absolutely beautiful. I had an amazing time. Their family they were so warm and welcoming. I mean, absolutely, it was such an extraordinary experience. But how did India get to this point? I mean, from being first of all having a massive population, but how did India get to the point where it is where it is right now? Because you're right, India thrived for centuries, and then now there India unfortunately is known for corruption and in the government and like massive poverty. So
Yeah.
how did it get here?
Yeah, it's so sad, there was a time when the emperors of India were so strong, and they had the world's strongest navy, and that's
Mhm.
why it's called. The Indian Ocean. There's
Yeah,
only one ocean that is named after a country, and that is the Indian Ocean, because India was so good in navy military, the economy, philosophy, and all that. And they went and conquered so many nations in what is now the Indian Ocean. They went to Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and they were so powerful. And then they broke up into smaller states. Then they got conquered by
Mm,
foreigners,
Foreigners.
from Central Asia first, and then the British,
yeah.
Yeah.
and then I mean, it's just the colonization, and so but China went through similar stuff, and then they were able to recover through a very strict political system and planning. So we have what is known as democracy, and there are some the cultural factors as well. So we'll see. But this is a lesson. So no empire, no country can last forever. You
Yeah.
cannot take, and you cannot take wealth and prosperity for granted. Like if you look at South America, some of the countries, like say, uh, Argentina,
Mm.
about 100 years ago, was as wealthy as the U.S. And
Hmm.
you look at the photos from Argentina in the 1920s and the 30s, it looks like Manhattan, with
Yeah.
like so many cars, beautiful buildings, so many architecture. And now look at that. So they have to be in debt. And they're like the number one country in terms of the debt with the IMF. They're really
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. To my knowledge, it was about $45 billion in debts, unfortunately.
They will be paying off
Forever.
forever.
Yeah. It's not
Forever.
gonna work. Let's move into BRICS.
Love it.
We want to talk about BRICS a little bit here, and within that context of BRICS, I wanted to have your take on. I mean, we'd like to have your take on where do you see, how do you perceive India's thinking regarding the recent development that Malaysia now submitted to the application for full membership or a strategic
Yeah.
partner.
As I personally want BRICS expansion, I want to have another 30 or 40 countries join BRICS. But the government in India, there are some people who are very worried about the delusion of the power of India within
Mhm.
BRICS. And then they're also afraid that BRICS is going to become basically China plus, and it's sort of a misguided, or maybe there's some truth to it, but you cannot be afraid of China so that you're going to miss out on this great opportunity for multipolarity, de-dollarization, because a very BRICS, is actually about freedom and democracy. Okay,
Mhm.
Mhm.
so the U.S. talks a lot about the freedom and democracy, but it's actually BRICS that is going to bring freedom and democracy, because there's no one country that controls everyone.
Yeah.
China doesn't have a veto power like the U.S. does with the UN or the G7.
Mhm.
And a de-dollarization, it just means that countries have more options. So it does not mean the death of a US dollar, but it just means that everybody has an option and they're not bound to one currency, and they'll be free from sanctions. Because right now the US is able to tell everybody and anybody what to do, who to trade with, what to buy, what to sell. It's like a big boss.
We have
And
no right. We have no right of doing that.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's also bad because people have memories, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yep.
So the people are not mad at Portugal or Spain now for the colonization that they did 400, 500 years ago,
Yeah.
because Spain and Portugal are not powerful. So the people forgive when the empire has fully fallen. But if the empire is on the decline, like say in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, there are going to be a lot of people with really bad memories.
Yeah.
They'll be like, hey, man, you tried to do a coup regime change. You killed 1 million of my people in the Middle East.
Yep.
And China will be like, you sanctioned my semiconductor company and you tried to kill Huawei. Maybe we will try to kill Apple.
Yeah.
So we don't know, but why do you want to make enemies if you are on the decline? So like this is where like what's his name, Wayne Gretzky, I mean, the ice hockey guy,
Oh
Yeah.
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, my secret is that I don't focus on the puck, but I focus on where the puck is going to.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because he gets to the place where the puck will be.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right? And
Yeah.
that's what the US and Europe have to do. So they have to figure out where the world will be,
Yeah.
10, 15 years from now. And then you change your policy now, and then you redirect so that the US will be safe and prosperous 10 years from now. And
Indeed.
the best way is for the US to join the multipolar team, right? So nobody is saying we want a multipolar world without the US, right? So
Yeah.
nobody is saying that. They want, if the US says, hey, man, so I'll be one of you, and I won't be your boss, and I won't do a regime change on you, and I won't like do what I did to Venezuela 2, 3 days ago. I
Mhm.
will stop such shenanigans. We will turn down the CIA's the efforts around the world, and we will be one of you. And the people will be very, very happy, to have the US join the Belt and Road Initiative. So like rather than bombing Gaza, like rather than spending $50 billion bombing Gaza, if the US gave Gaza $1 billion to build hospitals and schools and
Mhm.
factories and things like that, the Palestinians will love America,
Mhm.
right? But you spend $50 billion like killing something like 180,000 people in the last 9 months. That is by Lancet. So Lancet is a very prestigious uh, journal, and they have estimated that more than 180,000 Palestinians have died in the last 9 months. And now, but look at these children who are going to grow up. They're going to hate Israel. They're going to hate America. Why do you need that? When I went to China a few years back, not one person had one bad thing to say about the US.
Yeah.
And I would say, wow, Shanghai is like so much more beautiful than New York. They'd be like, no, 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 no. New York, San Francisco is so much better. China is so much behind America. We have so much work to do. We have to learn so much from the US, you know? So, but now it's like 5 years of tech war, economic war, sanctions, trying to kill Huawei, and always saying bad things about those communists, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And now the mood in China is very different. The young people, especially, they don't care much for the US. The older people, they still have the older memories, so they
Yeah.
kind of look up to the US. But if you talk to the teenagers in China,
Yeah.
they don't. You know.
Yeah.
So the US has to plan for the future.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, that's actually, wow, that's very sad and also true. And I think if the US understood the consequences of that, we would start to push a different direction, right? Instead of looking at all the countries of the world as enemies,
Yeah.
if we started to look at them as we live on this planet with everyone else, and
Amen.
so much of what we have comes from other countries. Most of our things are made in China or India. And so we cannot exist without each other. And I don't think most Americans fundamentally understand that other countries really have bad memories about the US. But it's true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. And people here don't know that. And if I could take control of the media, that's one of the first things I would tell everyone is, hey, we're actually making bad will across the world. We're not spreading democracy. That's not how other people see it. And that's not the reality of what it is either. And spreading bad will, it's like the bully on the playground. The moment that everyone else gets strong enough, they take the bully down. And so, the US is like, well, why are people hostile towards us? Well, it's because the US fundamentally has been a bully and has lied to the people about it. Because the people here don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
last
right,
question.
we have a last question here, SL, because we wanted to tackle this particular aspects of, because we want to have your insights into it, because it's very, very important.
Yes.
So you go ahead.
All
Elizabeth.
right.
You ask that question.
Will de-dollarization backfire?
The backfire, meaning what?
Meaning, backfire on us first of all in the US, and
Yeah.
how much impact will it have on the global financial system, knowing that
Okay.
it's the dollar that is still the
Mhm.
dominant reserve currency.
Yeah. So once again, I would go back to Ray Dalio, our favorite, the expert today. So he says, if you study the last 500, 600 years,
Yeah.
the country who trades the most, their currency also becomes the global currency, which should not be really be surprising. It's kind of logical.
Yeah.
And if you look at China, China is the number one trade partner for 130 countries in the world.
Mhm.
You know?
Wow.
And it's still the number one trade partner for the US,
Yeah.
although the US politicians don't realize that. They're like, ha ha ha, China became number two. Our number one trade partner is Mexico. Hello, where do you think the Mexican goods come from?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
China sends the intermediary goods to Mexico, and they just put together, and then they slap made in Mexico label on it, but it's still 90% Chinese.
Mhm.
So and China is doing a lot of de-dollarization. If you look at the cross-border transactions within China, more than half of that is now being done in the yuan, the Chinese yuan.
Mhm.
And just 10 years ago, a dollar used to be like 95%, and it's already fallen down. And if you look at the Russia-China trade, it's now virtually free of the US dollar. So at some point, what the de-dollarization means is that the demand for the dollar is going to go down around the world.
Mhm.
And in finance, what matters is the incremental demand. So that's like, well, even if the demand of the US dollar falls by, say, 10%, it's going to have a huge impact on the interest rates in the US bonds, the
Mhm.
treasuries. Right? And already this year, the US will pay $1 trillion on just the interest on the US debt.
Yeah.
So just imagine, so now the 10-year Treasury bond yield is about 4.2% or something like that. So what if it doubles to 8%,
Yeah.
as it was in the late 1970s? Right? So that could happen very easily. And then the cost of the imports will rise, the mortgage rates will be so high that the real estate will collapse. And as you mentioned, Elizabeth, the commercial real estate is already in big trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the interest rate is very, very key. It's a very, it has a profound impact, and especially for a nation with a lot of debt. The household debt is huge in America. The corporate debt is huge in America.
Mhm.
The federal government debt is so like through the skies. And so for such a debt country, the interest rate is like the oxygen. Okay,
Mhm.
so when the interest rates go up, you start to lose oxygen for the economy. So the bottom line is the de-dollarization will have very, very profoundly negative impact on the U.S. economy, the lifestyle, and its geopolitical power.
Wow, very, very insightful. Very, very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing this insights, SL. Where can our viewers find you?
You can find me on Twitter X. It's Kanthan 2030,
Yeah.
and then Substack, and hopefully you'll post the links for
Yeah,
my
and I have
YouTube
them right here
video.
on the screen, and I will post them on the description once we put, including your link to your YouTube channel, Geopolitical
Wonderful,
Demystified.
wonderful.
Well, on behalf of the entire community, SL, we want to say thank you for carving out time for us here. We truly appreciate you, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Elizabeth. So nice chatting with both of you.